Okay, we're gonna get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Patricia Lozano. I'm the Executive Director of Early Edge California, and I wanna welcome you all to our webinar today. The webinar will provide a brief introduction to the personalized oral language learning known as POL, and we'll explain how these strategies can support ECE educators in supporting oral language development and provide a reading aloud demonstration using these techniques. We have two amazing experts with us today. The first one is Dr. Carola Oliva Olson, and she's an associate professor at the California State University, Channel Islands, and she's a nationally recognized expert in dual language learners' learning and development. We also have Ana Arambula. She's a lead instructor at the dual language learning at the California State Channel Islands, and she's also a coach at the Language Learning Project. So I want to welcome them today, and we're going to get started with Dr. Carola.
Thank you, Patricia. Thank you for inviting us today. It's an honor and delight for both of us to be here with you and all of our participants. We see that the numbers keep going up and up. We are extremely thankful for you, for all the work that you do, your leadership in supporting support diverse children and families. And we're very impressed and grateful for your constant work and successes in the field of early childhood and bilingualism. You, as we said this earlier today in the same webinar, but in Spanish, that Patricia has it in her blood. You know, she's always advocating for the rights of children, their families, and the entire workforce. So thank you. It's a privilege to be here with you today. So today it's a really wonderful time of the day, because we've been so isolated and having always meetings with one person here and there. And now we get an opportunity in some way to feel connected with all our peers and colleagues. And we are here to share a little part of something that we've been doing for a while now. And it's these POL strategies, which are a set of strategies that a few of us came up with from the field that we put together in a model, so to speak, that would help teachers be able to grasp and have a simple way to support all children who are dual language learners. So POL, which stands for Personalized Oral Languages or Language Learning, was developed by Dr. Linda Spinoza, Whit Hayslip, Elizabeth Magruder, and myself many years ago. And we've been working with many projects and many programs, including with Ana, for example, in Fresno, and other programs to help ensure that all children who are learning in a second language or more than one language, but English is their second language, that they have access to all of the learning experiences that are planned for the day and all of the spontaneous learning experiences that happen throughout the day. So this is not to say that teachers have to be fluent in the languages of the children, but that they use and apply certain strategies and practices to make that learning available to the children. This is what makes it equitable. This is what makes the learning for everybody. And we know that we want all children to benefit from going into early care and education. So we want to make sure that children who are dual language learners reap those benefits. So this is why we're here today. We're not going to go through all of the components of POL, but even though there's a lot to learn about it. We're still bringing you some resources that we'll share with you at the end of the webinar so you can continue learning about them. Overall, what we're trying to accomplish is to promote the development of languages, the home language and English, to make sure that children have a strong foundation, a robust foundation, because we know that this is necessary for their academic and social future. So today we're going to focus on 3 suggestions, 3 recommendations on how to teach vocabulary. And we'll have more webinars to share with you in the near future, where we'll continue focusing on other components of POL.
Thank you, Carola, and welcome everyone to this webinar. We're super excited to be able to share this webinar with all of you. And so as you can see, these hearts are like our children. They're all different. None of them are the same. And so children are very diverse, including the languages that they speak in their families and cultural practices and interests, right? And so today our families more than ever need that emotional support to promote the health and wellness of their children. And so this COVID-19 virus has caused much anxiety to our children, to our families, to ourselves, and has brought upon us all a lot of stress. And so many of you right now are providing currently care for and caring for children for those essential workers, right? And some of you are working from home, developing ideas that are fun and engaging to do with children via internet, possibly recording yourselves and sharing videos with your children and families to still be able to stay connected with them. And so that is our goal today with all of you. And so the first recommendation that we have is one way to start supporting children in this situation that we're currently living is by teaching vocabulary to express feelings and emotions. It is important not to stick with the basic words, but to continually expand with new vocabulary, complex words, and even sophisticated words that bring a lot of richness to conversations that we're having with children. And so today I have a book with me that I've intentionally selected that deals with a lot of emotions, right? And the story is called The Way I Feel. And this book is also available in Spanish. A lot of you might be videotaping yourselves and reading stories in the children's home language. And so this book is also available in Spanish. And one thing that I would like to share is that it's very important to keep in mind that we don't necessarily have to read the entire book, but instead intentionally select those pages that have that rich content or vocabulary that you want to introduce to the children when selecting books with them. And so in this story, I've intentionally marked the pages that I want to introduce to you all today. And so here you can see that I've put a new word and covering the word that is within the book. And the word that I selected today is disillusioned. And you might be thinking, my goodness, that's a long word. How are children going to be able to articulate it? Eventually they will, when we expose them to rich opportunities where they can use it, and us ourselves are modeling it. And so before we read a story to the children, it's always important to introduce the vocabulary word and give a definition of what that word is and connect it with a real life example, whether it's an example that's connected to you personally or to the children themselves. And so being disillusioned is, a word that means that, you wanted something, but suddenly it couldn't happen for some reason or another. And so one might feel disillusioned. And so, for example, I felt disillusioned when my sister couldn't make it to my birthday dinner at the last moment. And so that made me feel a certain way. And so disillusioned is a bigger word than sad, right? Which probably would be a word that we're mostly used to using. Oh, I was sad. But if we use the most sophisticated words and we introduce these words to the children, we're adding more vocabulary to what they already know. And so At this moment, I would like to ask Dr. Carola, how are you feeling today? Have you ever felt disillusioned?
Yes, I felt disillusioned last weekend when I went to the market and I didn't find certain things that I needed or that I wanted to do some baking at home. That was, I felt disillusioned that was happening, but I was able to find them later on a different day. So I'm grateful now.
Thank you. And so that's another great opportunity for us to engage in the dialogue with the children. When we introduce the word, when we give them the definition and we connect it with something real, right? And we ask them the question, because that allows them to process and really capture what we're really trying to show them. And so, for example, here, the plans were made so long ago for you to visit me today, but now you can't come after all. I'm disillusioned, we can't play. And that might be something that a lot of our children are currently feeling, because they're missing their friends, they're missing you all educators who they're used to seeing every day. And so this is a big word that, like I said earlier, you might think children are not going to be able to articulate it, but you know, children have the ability to do that. And so another word that I also intentionally selected was grateful. And you can see here that I also covered the word. The original word in this book is thankful. And so thankful is also another word to say thank you, but also grateful. But grateful is more of a sophisticated word that still has kind of like the same meaning. And so grateful means when you give thanks for something that someone did for you, right? And so an example of that would be yesterday when my son washed the dishes. I told him, I'm grateful for you because you helped me wash the dishes. I could have said, thank you for washing the dishes, but instead I chose more of a sophisticated word to add to him, that my hopes are that as I continue to use it more, that he will begin to use it as well in everyday lives. And that is our goal with our children. We want to introduce rich vocabulary words to them every day. And so like here we can see this boy is grateful that this person, it might be his dad, and you can also create your own stories. His dad helped and fixed his car. And so he's grateful for that, right? Instead of saying thank you, we can say grateful. Another word that I chose was bored, you know, and you might say, you know, well, bored is a word that a lot of children use or have heard, but are they using it frequently in the context that it is? And so, for example, bored is when you're not doing something that you like, or when someone asks you to do something and you say, that's boring, I don't want to do that, right? And so an example of this would be if I were to ask my youngest son to help me prepare dinner, he would say, oh no, that's too boring. I'd rather go outside and play. And so that's also an example of how we can introduce new words with bored with our children and use it in that context. And so, Carola, has there ever been a time where you felt bored?
Oh, many times. Sometimes when I have to wait for a long, long time for something to happen, or when I have to call for the internet to work and nobody's answering in the phone. I get impatient, but I also get bored waiting.
Right. And so again, connecting that word that we're introducing to the children with the definition and connecting it with ourselves just makes it more meaningful and more rich in that vocabulary, right? And so again, this was just an example of some words that I intentionally selected to show you all, but just know that that's one of the strategies that you could also be doing while you're video recording yourselves and sharing these videos with the children and families that you're supporting virtually. And so what you're seeing right now in your screen, a lot of you might already have this emotional check-in, right? In your classrooms, in your homes, where when children arrive, they check in to see how they're feeling. And so that could be hard when we don't have direct access to children. But if you're doing those Zoom calls with your children, and families, because, children need an adult there, excuse me, with them to navigate the technology, asking the child, how are you doing today? Asking the parent as well, how are they doing? Is very, very important. And not only that, but asking ourselves when we wake up, how do I feel today? Am I feeling frustrated? Am I feeling excited? Am I grateful? Because those are emotions that change throughout the day. And so knowing that, is so powerful as well. And the idea of the cube, a lot of you might have this already in your learning settings, might have already suggested it to your parents, but simply asking, sharing this idea with parents about taking pictures of their child, expressing different emotions with their face and taking a picture. And if they don't have the ability to print it, maybe they can save it on their phones. And every morning when their child wakes up and before night, asking them, how are you feeling today? And you will be surprised that, if children, the older 3 and 4-year-olds might end up asking you, how are you feeling today, Anna? How are you feeling today, Mom? And so that is also an opportunity for us to really realize that how important those emotional connections are with children and us adults as well. And so this is just an example, that I wanted to show. And what you're seeing right now on your screen are 4 vocabulary words, right? Timid, thankful, worried, enthusiastic. Those are big words that we might be thinking, my gosh, how am I going to explain timid? How am I going to explain worried or enthusiastic? When we introduce these words with a definition and we combine it with the real life example, it just makes it so much meaningful. And we know that preschool children need to hear many words, complex words, sophisticated words throughout the day. So it is very important that as educators, given our times that we're living right now, that we really connect with our children and our families social and emotionally when we're selecting books, when we're engaging in those conversations with them virtually. And some of you who are providing care for those essential workers, doing that also is very, very powerful. Thank you.
Thank you. So we started with the first, we started with the first recommendation or suggestion, and that's to use words that connect with the social emotional well-being of the children. And now we'd like to share another recommendation on teaching new words, new vocabulary, and it's to incorporate the use of gestures. Gestures not only helps children with those new words, but also for children who are dual language learners and are having to learn a lot more words, then it's easier for them to retain the word and the meaning when we use gestures. And we've been using gestures since with babies, all the way when they were born, and trying to play with them and engage with them. Well, the use of gestures is still useful even later because it makes it playful and it makes it engaging, but it plays even a bigger role in that it helps them remember the word. So it uses 2 parts of the brain, movement and language. So with this story that we chose, that also exists in English and Spanish, it just fits perfectly because this little owl who gets lost actually falls from the nest while sleeping, uses gestures to explain what her mom looks like so that other animals can help her, can help it find its mom. So it's just perfect to incorporate gestures and explain the concept of gesture to the children. And as, I don't know if you are familiar with this story, but it's also incorporating some vocabulary that relates with emotional well-being. It's about being lost. It's about asking, are you okay? Are you worried? Don't worry, come with me, I'll help you. So throughout this story, we see oh my gosh, the squirrel helping the little owl find the mom. And so the little owl is explaining what the mom looks like. So one of the things that she says, she is very big, like this. And this is where the squirrel goes and brings a bear. And so the little owl said, no, that's not my mom. And it goes on like this with other gestures, trying to explain that the mom has pointy ears, and then the squirrel brings a rabbit, a bunny. No, that's not my mom. My mom has big eyes, and then brings a frog. So at the end, it ends up with a wonderful solution in that they found the mommy, and they're all very happy at the end. But really, this story is so helpful in presenting and introducing the concept of a gesture, and so useful for us to incorporate into our teaching so that all children can have access to the learning, but also understand. It builds the understanding, it helps with imprinting new vocabulary, and it helps remember. So this is a lovely book for all of us to use and incorporate. You'll find that there are some YouTube videos that share the story, and it's very easy to access. It has two different titles in English for some reason. So you can find it as A Little Lost or Little Owl Lost. And let me share with you here some of the words that we've been focusing in on, and also some of the activities that we can easily do to provide an opportunity for children to narrate the story, to focus on the parts of the story that build comprehension. As you're putting the story together, you're understanding the parts, what's happening, the sequences. But also it helps because children are using their language. They're producing language, and they're using the words that they've just learned. So here in the slide, you'll see the pieces that focus on the characters, which we laminated and we provide to children on the floor an opportunity for them to recreate the story. And this really brings it to the third one, which is to foster wonder and curiosity. We want mutual engagement. We want all of these interactions to be fun, joyful, and for children to go beyond what is in the story. So for example, with the one that I just showed, if we just stayed with the images, the illustrations of the story, we miss an opportunity. And the opportunity would be to bring new books, ask families to explore online through their phones, their Padlets and so forth, and learn more about real owls. What are real owls like? What do they do? What do they look like? What are parts of their body? Where do they live? What do they eat? And then in addition to that, how do we provide opportunities for all of you to suggest things and do things with the families while you're online? So Anna has suggested doing some short videos where you have the story and you read the story and then share that video clip with the families. You can do that if you're bilingual in several languages, or you can ask someone to read it and to tape it for you in another language. You can also ask the families to tape themselves and thinking about different endings to the story. And in this case, this one you see, butterfly, butterfly, I have it in my office. I don't have it here with me in English. I have it in Spanish. But there's many times where you have books in other languages that you can retell, obviously in English or in the language that you speak. And the nice thing about this book, and the reason we want to show it to you, is that it's important to include children, expose them to joyful, inspiring, and positive stories during this time. Things are very challenging and hard, and providing stories that end on a happy note, that bring a lot of color and interest. So when stories have a plot, something that is happening that then needs to be resolved, and then there's a good ending, are very positive and useful at this time. This one in particular, I'll show to see if you can see it closer. Remember, it's in English and Spanish, but what's nice about it is that it's about a girl who's outdoors by herself, meaning she's not in school in the program, but she's by herself playing, entertained. She finds a butterfly that she's very interested in. She plays with it, and then she doesn't see it anymore. So she's looking, searching for it. And as she does, she's finding these other insects and little animals that are involved in other activities, with doing different actions, and has very, very rich vocabulary that we can take the opportunity to teach as well. Always incorporating the gestures that we just talked about. And as you go along with short text, but interesting and colorful illustrations, at the end, she looks up to see if she can, because she cannot find it anymore. And there it reappears, this beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous, just mesmerizing butterfly. So this is to say that in teaching vocabulary, in presenting children with new words, which is a wonderful, it's a good opportunity to do so as you dialogue and engage with them through the internet, or if you are working in a program right now serving active responders, then to focus on the words that amplify, that give more breath to share how we feel, how we also to remember those words by using gestures, using stories, because the stories are less intimidating and are useful a way to mediate the learning with children, but also to use stories that enhance positivism, the idea that things are going to be okay, and beautiful, joyful, and inspiring things that can happen to animals, different characters, and so forth.
Thank you, Carola, for that. And so all of you who have joined us for this webinar are going to have access to these resources that you're seeing right now on your screen that are going to be available so that you can continue to enhance and dialogue virtually or in person if you're providing care and education to the children of those essential workers at this time, and how we can introduce rich vocabulary words to the children throughout the day, if we have them in our programs, and if not, being very intentional in selecting those books that, as we mentioned earlier, that really connect with the social and emotional state of mind of all children, but also keeping in mind to check in with them, with their families, to check in with each other, right? All of us are educators. We all have emotions and are feeling different in some type of way. And so it's very important to do those emotional check-ins with each other as well, and with our children. And so there's many great resources that are available. A lot of you are probably recording yourselves and sharing those videos with the families. And so just, our goal today was to provide you with some recommendations of how you can continue to enhance the amazing work that you're already doing in connecting with these children virtually or in person, as some of you might be. And so I want to thank you all for being here today, and want to reassure you that you all will get access to the resources and the list of books that we also shared with you today. You'll also be able to get the titles of those as well, so that if you're interested, and these are just a couple of books that really connect with what is really going on right now, social emotionally, with everyone. And so thank you all.
And one thing that I'd like to share about the resources that you're seeing here, the original article about poll strategies is the one that you see here, Many Languages, One Teacher. There's two subsequent articles that were just published this year in the NAEYC book called Each and Every Child, Teaching Preschool with an Equity Lens. So you'll find two to continue your reading. And the book that you see here, from Aliki, called Feelings, is a great, the reason we put it here is because it's a great way to just have a conversation with children about one of the different sceneries or scenes, I guess, not scenery, scenes that you'll see in the pages within the book. And so there's a child that had an ice cream and the ice cream fell, right? And so it's nice to discuss, because we've seen a lot of these things happening to others, and promoting and discussing what that means. And it's being empathetic to somebody else who's going through hard times or disillusionment or frustration. So it's trying to provide dialogue that includes the use of all these words, and have families really support each other in experiencing all of these feelings and emotions.
All right. Okay. Thank you, Carola and Ana. Now it's time for questions. I have a few here on the Q&A already. So if you have questions, please add them to the Q&A section. So I'm going to start. Here's one. I'm having some challenges with getting my children to engage with me while I ask questions and explain what newly introduced words mean. How might I encourage the children to participate?
I think that it's finding something that they're interested in. So we find something, maybe they're bored and you ask for a problem, something that is going on that you need help, and you ask them for help to see if they can fix it. Or it might be something ridiculous. You need to bring their attention to something if you don't see them already paying attention, and you find something that they're interested in. They might go outside, if you can't go outside, and look underneath a piece of wood, look in a plant, and engage in a conversation that builds on curiosity. You're trying to promote and open up their sense of being curious on something. And that's where you start building those connections, those threads that establish a bigger dialogue. but it has to be something interesting. And I think this is key. So having stories that have a plot usually are very useful because they don't know what's going to happen, and they want it to be resolved. We all want things to be resolved. But if you find that it's hard for you to use the books, then finding something in your close environment that draws their attention, then I would that's the starting point to build a conversation and build the language from there, the vocabulary.
I think too, I would like to add to that, that, depending on, when you're in your normal classroom environment, right, you wouldn't do a large group, but instead maybe when you are, setting up these virtual calls with the children, instead of doing it with inviting all 15 children, or depending what number of children you have in your classroom, maybe you put them in, you have different times of the day where you're doing a virtual call with maybe 3 children at a time. So that also allows you that opportunity to engage with them back and forth, right? Instead of trying to do it with all that once. But even with that, if that was something that you decided to do, maybe throughout the day you do do a Zoom or a virtual call where you invite all of the children so that they can at least check in, see each other's faces. But if you're going back into that intentionality and you want to engage children in that dialogue and back and forth conversation and curiosity, doing it in smaller groups is probably going to be more engaging for both the children and even for yourself as the educator.
Thank you. So there are a few questions about how to do a read out loud video right now for pre-K teachers, for pre-K, for preschoolers, and for how long, and if we know of any specific technology that we should be using. So, I think we are all trying to figure out what's the best way to do it. But what you saw, and then I'll let Carola and Ana, is just just pretending that you're doing it in the classrooms with your children there and asking the questions, and just I think that if you create a video with your phone or if you record it via Zoom, the main thing is for the child or the children to connect and to see you and see some familiarity. And using all these techniques that Carola and Ana are sharing, I think it's something that we think could help right now. As this is a new era for us to do distance learning, knowing that we, especially for young kids, it's very important to have the interaction. But given where we are, I think that just putting as many elements as possible and just doing all the things that we do that Carola and Ana just demonstrated is going to be helpful for kids, for the children, if they're watching a video of you reading a book, or if you have it, if you're able to do a Zoom meeting, that would be awesome.
I think also inviting the children to think about what a gesture might be for a certain word instead of us giving them that, and incorporating that into songs. Next webinar will focus on songs and chants, and it builds on what we've talked about today. We're going to do it in small parts, otherwise it gets quite overwhelming. But if you have FaceTime, if you have Skype, or if you have Zoom, whatever platform you're using or you have available, engaging with small groups of children or one-on-one or even pairs, that's fun. And it's even better than large groups. And also getting them, trying to be creative with some ideas, just like we demonstrated that having the characters of the books in, maybe they don't have a way to print them, and all they can do, but what they can do is they can design them. So if they draw the characters of the book and then they have their own parts, then you can recreate your story in different ways. So we have to be quite creative, but again, if it's connected to the big idea, which is to support their emotional health and well-being. And it's learning new words, incorporating gestures and movement, and making it joyful, then we are accomplishing quite a bit already.
Okay, let me see, there are other questions. What other tips do you have for story time with toddlers who are non-verbal yet?
So again, the use of gestures is key, and singing short songs. The time is always very short with toddlers, right? And playing with sound and level of the voice and the repetition in parts of the story. When this Little Owl Lost is also available in as a board book, and so it's quite useful, maybe not in the same way as we introduced it and used it today, but there are some things that you can say and use gestures with as you're turning the pages. So we'll do a session, Anna and I will be doing a session for infants and toddlers in about 2 weeks. So we invite you to participate and join us in that one as well.
So there were a few questions about copyright. When you're doing videos, we shared an article, and then Stephanie, maybe you can resend it, that came out explaining, providing some guidance on copyright right now, and given that we're in an emergency, there might be some, opportunities and exceptions for reading a book and creating a YouTube channel and all that. So we recommend for you to read that article and get some guidance. Let me see what else.
I see quite a bit of questions about how to support the home language, and we'll have more sessions and use all of the POL strategies together, ensure that children have the access to the learning experiences that they need and that they have a right for. And we'll build on those components in the next sessions. But in terms of the language, it's important to everything that we do with the families, whether we send videos or materials, or when we engage in a dialogue with them, is that we explicitly mention the importance of having conversations or reading the stories or discussing the stories in their home language. That we don't leave it for interpretation, but that we actually say it, and not just one time, right? And so that's a first. And as we continue and learning more about all the POL strategies, I think we need to start with that little piece, which is reminding and sending the message to everyone that home language is key.
There's one question about doing Zoom classes, and I think we're all new to this with children. Any tips, recommendations to keep them engaged?
I didn't hear it, but I think.
Oh, you didn't hear?
No, it cut off.
Oh, that I'm having Zoom classes with my children. Any tips, recommendations to keep them engaged?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, if you do these Zoom calls, doing it in small groups so that children are actively engaged. And if, depending on what you're going to do, if you're going to select a book, being very intentional that it's a book that, you have selected rich vocabulary from, and it's not going to be an extremely long Zoom call, and so being very intentional in what pages, like we showed you today, in selecting those that you really want to focus on, so you can engage in dialogue with the children, back and forth conversations with them without losing them. We know that wait time is something that, you know, children sometimes become impatient with. And so being very intentional when you're selecting books, that they're colorful, that there's a rich meaning behind it, that most importantly, children can connect to it during these times that they're home. You know, I think that it just gives them more opportunity for engagement, and it encourages them to engage in those dialogues with us when we make it inviting and we make it exciting. And if you add on a song to sing with them, you know, that even makes it even more engaging. And depending on what technology you're going to be using, if it's a Zoom or if it's a FaceTime, you know, keeping those things in mind is also very important, because it'll be really hard for a child who's FaceTiming to do any type of physical movement with the phone, you know, up in the air. But if it's more of a electronic device that can be more stationary, then everybody can see each other doing all these different gestures. And so that can also be a way to engage children as we're reading stories, singing songs, or just dialoguing with them and things that we're offering them.
And you might want to extend the story or recreate the ending and ask them, well, what might be a different ending? And let's make it ridiculous. Or let's make it, you know, let's find something that they have close by, and that thing has to be included in the end. What could it be? So trying to go beyond the things that you would normally do, but putting some, you know, a gist of fun and funness and something unexpected, so that draws their interest and in the Zoom time that you're in the meeting with them.
There's one question. When you have mixed language children in class, do you read the story in both languages?
So that's a great question. So the idea, we don't want to read the story in both languages at the same time. And we want to use strategies to engage. If you're reading in Spanish at that time, for example, or Vietnamese, or Armenian, or French, you want to make sure that you're using certain strategies so that all the children are engaged and following the storyline and are understanding, and that the goal of the activity is available, right, for everyone to experience. And that's what we're going to teach. You know, that takes time. There's quite a bit of time needed for us to share all that we do for that. But if we were to read it in Vietnamese and then again in English, those who are trying to learn Vietnamese won't make an effort to understand it, because they know it's coming in English after. So it's an ineffective practice. We want to separate the two, but support the learners in understanding and learning the words so that they can follow the storyline and then they can participate. Now, if I say, always make in parentheses note that this is not to say that if there's a problem with a child and the child is in distress, we do not teach language. That's not about teaching language at that time. Dr. Linda Spinoza says this all the time. You address the situation and the child's social emotional being at that time, right? And language learning and English or Spanish or whatever other languages, that's at a separate time. Wit is here.
All right. Okay, we have a few more minutes. So there's another question about how long do you think a Zoom class should be for preschoolers and pre-K age kids? How long do you think that a Zoom class should be for a preschooler?
So that's a tough question, because this is as new as can be. And it depends on what you are already set up to do, or do you have, you know, are you with them a great part of the day? Then how are you structuring that time to do many different things? If you're engaging in a Zoom meeting for one time a day, again, remember preschoolers, their attention span 20 minutes, depending on how it goes and what you're doing. But it really has to do with what we have to do, and then what can we do with that time that we have to engage the children. So we're doing and trying everything, and we're going to see that some things are just not going to work at all, and others are going to be better. And it depends how they're doing at that given time, how the children are doing. Now, if you have many children, like Anna said, that's going to be very hard, because it's hard already, right? We know that small group interactions are much more efficient in person, and in this modality, it's even harder.
Okay, let's see if we can, I think we have time
Wonderful.
for one.
There's someone here, Patricia, who says that they have meetings for 45 minutes.
Yes.
They're very engaging, and that's wonderful. We're going to learn from all of you. This is right. We want to hear your stories to see how we can share with others what you're doing, what's working, and what we try to do is share the work that we do that can influence and enhance your practice and how you engage with children in this new way.
I agree. Yes. So yeah, and feedback that you want to send us on any stories, please feel free to. We'll share our information when we're going to send the PowerPoint, the video, the list of books. And I know there were some questions about, about technology, about what to use when you do recordings. We'll send also some tips for that after the webinar. And then, that could be helpful for you if you're planning to do a video at home. There's a question about, introducing big vocabulary words for little kids. Can you explain a little bit more why is it appropriate to do it? This just the importance of not being afraid of introducing, like what you were saying when you were reading a story, introducing big words to kids and expanding their vocabulary.
The question is, why is it important to expand their vocabulary?
Yeah, introducing big
Yes,
words.
that's a great question. So the more children are exposed to words, and meaningfully, meaning that these words mean something to them that they can use, and we get into that practice, they develop bigger vocabularies, meaning they understand more, and they're able to use those words to describe what they're seeing, what they feel, etc. So it opens up the world, but most importantly is it's like a muscle in the brain. The more words you hear and you learn as a child and during their early years, the foundational years, the more apt you are later in life to recognize when you don't understand a word and to try to make meaning out of it. So it's almost like an alertness. You're open to hearing and wanting to know and learn for the rest of your life. There's so many advantages for it. Also, when we know that this is an important predictor for reading and writing, when children start elementary school and they're learning to read and write, it's easier for them to recognize those words and then understand text. So I can't say enough about the importance of learning more words, and that it's not just the typical words that we use every day. It's important to learn rare, complex, sophisticated words that make us interested in language.
Well, thank you. We're out of time, but I want to thank Dr. Carola and Anna for their time and their expertise, and all of you for participating and for being our heroes and teaching our children. So we were happy that you were able to join us, and we'll be sending the information about the next webinar soon through. Now that you participated in this one, you will receive information about the future ones and all the resources that we mentioned. So thank you, everyone, and hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you for having us.
you. Bye.
Hope to see you soon, all of you. Bye.